Cool. Hello again. Sorry again for the slight delays in videos. Everything feels a bit scattergun and all over the shop at the moment. So partly down to the days to which I do these videos in the middle of the week and start of the week. So what I'm going to do with this video is, well, this and the football, which is going to be coming later, is looking at doing them over the weekends instead, as I think there's a better space in my weeks or sort of my weekends to be doing sort of the videos. So sort of the week with Will, potentially on the Saturday, football roundup on the Sunday. So I'm going to do everything today. This is going to be absolutely crammed episode, sort of going over other weeks. So then it should sort of, hopefully, restructuring it all should make life a bit easier and simpler, and I avoid this sort of congestion and complete mess whilst sort of trying to get some sort of semblance of structure back into everything at the moment. So bear with. I do apologise for the people that do watch regularly and listen, and that is always greatly appreciated. So once again, thank you. So as I was sort of saying, is I'm going to go through a week with Will, and this is going to be, I say, a week and a bit, and that way I'm definitely up to schedule with everything. And then it's going to be a case of starting sort of with Monday things and going through to the Saturday, sort of doing a fresh one there. So it'll be maybe a week and a bit with Will and football roundup. Now, obviously, I'll go into sort of the week's sort of work there, and yeah, I'll go into football one. Thankfully, my song is sort of tenuously linked to both, so I'm actually quite happy with that decision, if I can pronounce and say it, of course, but cross that bridge once again. Cool. So, Monday, well, I suppose a couple of Mondays ago now, it would have been back to work on sort of doing some site work in what was very miserable, wet rain, sort of small topographical survey, sort of house and garden, sort of the bread and butter work-wise of things, with the slight exception to the fact that this was a project that required Ordnance Survey benchmark. Now, for sort of those that sort of don't know, on the Ordnance Survey sort of used to put out sort of these markings on particularly sort of old buildings and structures to help with the level and orientation of surveys. Now, to spot one, it's essentially pyramid, line across it. So if you ever sort of wandering around and spot one, well, as a surveyor, I think you get sort of used to it, and your eyes just sort of become fixated on it. But if you're ever curious as to what that mark is triangle, line over the top. But yes, so these are sort of set points which have set eastings, northings, and level to help adjust sort of level and position of a survey. Cool. So that's obviously meant that sort of traditionally nowadays we GPS sort of several control points in order to orientate and level our surveys, although obviously technically I did have this correction with someone before. It should be called GNSS, and so I'm guilty of saying GPS, because GPS in itself is a system of sort of the satellites used. It's not the actual sort of what's actually being used. So for example, in America it is GPS. For, I believe it's Russia, I think it's GLONASS. I think Europe was developing one. I must admit I'm not as up to scratch with all this as I probably should be. And then they use GNS, different sort of GNSSs to sort of do it. So yeah, that's sort of an abbreviation that other people aren't necessarily as aware. Everyone, it's just GPS is just sort of the main thing. It's the main system. It's the main thing. It's what's known, even if it's technically not right. But it's by the by, really. So then, sort of the next couple of days after that is essentially doing CAD work. draw up a survey, make sure I've adjusted the survey to sort of using the benchmark provided. So then there was a little bit more of a busybody sort of work, as it were, in order to just sort of catching up sort of case studies, sort of helping out more admin side of things, I suppose. Something I'm a bit more uncomfortable with. I think I'm sort of very much in my mind's like, here's my job, go and do that. It's like surveyor, go and sort of go on site, measure it up, draw it up, go again sort of thing. So this is sort of a new, it's a bit of a weird one. Like, I don't like going into other people's work and sort of playing with that. It's sort of me and mine, I think, is sort of how I'm used to it personally. Although I suppose a good surveyor should be sort of able to draw up anything from anyone's sort of work, but then we did a survey in Great Braxted, which is sort of a small area in Essex. So this was a job that required topographical survey around sort of small building, and the building itself requiring building elevations, floor plans, and sections going through the building. So almost the full sort of works of sort of what was required there, or sort of what I'm capable of. To which I thankfully had an assistant, so I don't just sort of stress and worry about all of that. Sort of, if I'm trying to do every single thing, it'll drive me up the wall, drive me mental. If I get a good, capable sort of assistant trainee with me, I can sort of, if I trust them enough, I can give them roles and responsibilities to lighten the load, to sort of, okay, if you can handle that, that and that, I can handle this, this and this. I can handle the more complicated things, you can handle the other things. It's sort of an opportunity where it benefits both people, because I can sort out my bit, I'm giving them roles and responsibilities sort of for them to learn, and sort of I'm not going to be too overrun for them to then ask questions as, how would you do this? How would you do that? Am I doing this right? And so it was sort of a good amalgamation. So the person I was with managed to get sort of a good deal of sort of training and comfort and knowledge that they've sort of gone and done something. And then I've sort of been able to nip round sort of the site and get things done ahead of schedule, quicker, and it sort of benefits the manager as well. So it's sort of a win-win-win, I suppose. To which I could then happily start processing up the job and drawing it up on the Friday. Which will lead into the next week. I mean, over that weekend, it's my weekend at the moment, I can happily say, looking at my funny animal faces calendar on my fridge, is very much empty this month. It's not to say I haven't sort of had to sort of spend money and do things this month, because I have, but it's sort of a wind down. Let's just try and save money. Let's sort of balance the books a little bit after sort of several months of sort of heavy spending, sort of highly active, doing lots and lots of different things. So hopefully this makes life easier. I can sort of, calm down, relax over it all, and just sort of get back to sort of the normality, and to have a ideally not horrendous bank balance, which is, I think, what a lot of people would strive for. So going into the week that's just gone, it was finishing up sort of said CAD work of the previous site, which was happily done without too much fuss. And then the next site was sort of an overgrown land registry site, which had a couple of different challenges. The main one being is that this site was essentially directly off a slip road on A14, to which you needed to sort of pull in, brake very quickly, pull your vehicle back, because you're going to be along the side of a main road with everyone's doing national. and sort of getting to the position there, which was probably my biggest worry throughout the day. Not the surveying side of it, the ability to sort of manoeuvre safely on and off of the one of the busiest roads in East Anglia, to be honest, which is it was a bit of a worry, but I think I managed that. The actual site in itself wasn't sort of too bad. I could argue sort of slightly overgrown within certain areas. As a land registry site, thankfully, it's not a sort of full topographical survey, so you don't have to go in quite as heavy on the detail. It's essentially picking up major sort of boundaries and structures and sort of road lines, anything that can be overlaid sort of with land registry and ProMap plans, in order to help sort of fit, orientate, and then give the plan back to sort of said client, sort of relaying sort of key information. Is this boundary correct? Has someone pinched land? Everything sort of fitting fine? Is this where it's supposed to be? Is that where it's supposed to be? Sort of thing. So that wasn't sort of too bad. So I sort of had that sort of the following day to process, to draw up, as well as sort of additional sort of work looking at sort of another officer's and other colleagues' work, drawing up a measure building survey. Now, this was sort of a little bit of a frustrating thing, as I'll naturally do everything to the best of my ability. However, if you've been handled, so if you've been given the data, the information, you need that to be 100% correct. Really, you need to be able to trust that what you've been given is right, is accurate. And sort of looking at it at first glance, unfortunately, there were several issues with it. Sort of when you're doing 3D scanning, you're registering and fitting sort of scans to work within each other, and then sort of using checkerboards or known points to help adjust the level and orientation. Now, unfortunately, the first step there was that it didn't fit within itself. There were several sort of key rooms which you could sort of see how they should sort of fit. Sort of these rooms were sort of way back from the main sort of building line. You could see sort of two doors within a wall, which exactly the same width. It should have been exactly the same doors. And you sort of saw about a metre thick wall, which, I'll be honest, it's not possible to get that, but it's a pretty flipping rare. Particularly as a sort of an internal wall, not a sort of the main sort of building line, the main sort of structural wall, which was a bit worrying. So then you could sort of work around that, and then sort of have to speak to colleagues in order to sort of best fit and adjust that. And then had a sort of trip up into, well, I suppose it's just about Norfolk, within Beccles, sort of filling out or sort of doing a site sort of spec that was very similar to sort of the ones I did elsewhere, sort of within Woodbridge, sort of looking at extra detail, extra levels, on the basis that the client wants to have sort of an accurate sort of 3D model with the topographical survey, and as well as the 3D model being sort of a lot clearer as to what the 3D points are represented, because primarily when I do a sort of 3D model, I keep everything the same layer. In this situation, it's different, so I have to make sure everything matched up. But the site in itself was sort of wasn't sort of too big, too strenuous, even with sort of the traditional level of information. But sort of there was sort of a fun few moments within that day, sort of finding a few Environment Agency benchmarks instead of sort of the mark that was shown. They're just sort of nails in the ground. There were two of them. Unfortunately, neither of them, when looked up later, had sort of anything sort of set down in sort of the database as I did go looking. Maybe for a weird bit of fun. Most people wouldn't consider that fun, but curiosity, I suppose, then. As well as there was sort of a little black lab sort of puppy going around in a stroller because it got tired from its walk, of which definitely had the trainee sort of more preoccupied with that than the work, but sort of, no, that's what it is. So then I had sort of the Friday being able to wrap up that sort of job, wrap up more of the Measure Building survey as sort of the data set had come back sort of correctly. And then I suppose that leads into this sort of current Saturday that we just had. It sort of was more of a productive one. I think my other weekends, you sort of have days when you have a lot of energy and you can run and you can do loads of, I've got loads of jobs around the house, tick, 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 and then days where you're just a bit, and that was sort of a good, fun, productive day. Well, fun, to which managed to get a lot of things done. Sort of very happy. Sorted out a big pile of paperwork that was sort of scattered around all over the tables and countertops and living room floor and everything. So that sort of managed. Just sort of a lot of cleaning, a lot of washing, weekly shop sort of squeezed in there as well. And then that would sort of make us up to sort of Sunday today. I'm going to reveal the song at the end because I'm going to go straight into this. This is going to be a big bumper episode for anyone that does want to sort of commit and watch, which is always appreciated. I suppose I wanted to have a bit of a chat over mental health as well. I know it's a bit boring, but this is sort of something I stressed at the start of my episodes, and I don't think I think it's sort of something that's been bothering me, hence the sort of breakdown in sort of structure of videos and things like that. And I don't think my headspace has always been right. I think one little thing, or lots of things sort of externally can then sort of have an effect on me towards other people, towards other things. Sort of rightly and wrongly, there needs to be sort of an outlet for sort of anger and sort of sadness. It's not something you should really ever be bottling up as someone that doesn't necessarily the best person at being able to deal with it. Being angry or upset with something is fine. It's justified. You can be that. It's fine. Like, it's okay to have a bad day. that's the important thing. I don't think other people always sort of pick up on that sometimes, particularly when I've been having bad days over the last couple of weeks, and that sort of led to me getting sort of a lot more aggressive than I say I normally am. And I think people need to, if you can see someone sort of struggling, if you can see the sort of out of their normal behaviour, just, I don't know, try and be nice, try and work out what's sort of going on, and just sort of, maybe that person sort of not, let's not sort of try and push their buttons. That's one of the things I think, particularly with me, is someone that's very easily wound up and stressed. I'm someone whose buttons are very easy to press, to the point that it becomes a game to a lot of people, and it really shouldn't. I think people need to know and learn better than that. It's not nice, it's not fun, it's not enjoyable, particularly when you sort of feel that you don't necessarily always have the structure there for people to talk to. And sort of if everything's sort of closing in that environment, that's not really very nice. I think people need to be more aware, more mindful of that. That was a bit of a sound. So I was going to look into the football now, try and balance things up and things sort of finishing on a happier side of things. So obviously it was the start of the Champions League for the previous week, with the new structure in place, with games playing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm not personally sure how I feel about that, but it's for them to try and get all of the Champions League games done within the 1 week, as they used to be sort of a lot more spread out. Excuse me for that. And so a lot more games, a lot of them crammed in. So the simple structure of it is, well, I'm going to try and simplify it. is that every team sort of put into different pots at the start based on where they finished in the league. They're like the European coefficient sort of thing. Like if you're winners of one league, you'll go into like pot A, and sort of if you've got like European pedigree as well, you'll stay in higher pots and so on like that. And so you're a team that's then drawn against sort of each of the different pots. I believe it's sort of, I can't remember, 6 or 7 games. So you're playing everything like a team from every other pot, and it's sort of mix and match whether those are home and away games. So you play all those games. The top 8 teams in this sort of table that's going to be created from that automatically qualify for the knockout stages of the Champions League. Then you've got the next, I believe it's 9 to 24, which will then have like knockouts playing each other to then fight for the place to get into the knockouts. And then the rest of the teams below that are out. It's no falling into the Europa League or Conference League or whatever. You're just out. That's done. So there is an increase of games in that respect. But yeah, so I was going to go through the games and then possibly just try and go through the different teams with the games at the same time. So I'll try and do this in some sort of order. So first one, Juventus PSV. Juventus have fallen off a bit in recent years. They've had the new sort of manager in Thiago Motta, who did very well at Bologna. Against PSV, who are sort of the powerhouse in the Netherlands at the moment, whilst Ajax are still sort of struggling a little bit. It's not too surprised by the scoreline, sort of 3-1. I think Juventus are a team that I think should normally in the old school groups sort of should be getting out of them. They've got sort of a lot of a sort of very much a younger sort of team. They're focused on more on homegrown players, partly because of the financial restraints, and I think that's actually helped them more than anything. So I'm fairly certain they'll get through. Potentially not in the top 8, but in the knockout rounds, I don't expect them to go out. PSV, I think, are a team that are going to struggle a bit more. I think the Netherlands, generally speaking, although they very much dominate their league, as I think there's gaps in quality throughout the there's the top sort of couple of teams within the Eredivisie, and then the rest are a bit. And I think they might sort of struggle. I think they'll have better times against sort of weaker opposition. But this is one of the teams that I potentially see sort of going out. This is sort of what I sort of expected in this result. I need to go through every team's sort of fixtures in order to work out likelihood in that respect. But I think they're a team that will sort of struggle to get through. If they get through into the knockouts, I don't see them, that sort of mini knockout round, I don't see them getting into the actual main knockouts, as it were. Cool. Young Boys Villa. Not really expecting too much from Young Boys, but I sort of figured home advantage. They've been in European competition for a while. It's a bit naff. Very much a team I don't expect to sort of get through. I just don't think that league in itself is an overly strong one. But however, Villa sort of away from home, you didn't know what you were sort of going to expect. Sort of the first sort of big European night back for them. There's a lot of quality. There's a manager there with European experience, 3-0. Villa are, I think, a team that I think will give sort of almost sort of dark horses in this. I think they will give some of those bigger European teams some really tough games and are not to sort of be sort of slept on. I don't think they'll qualify automatically, but I can see them sort of getting through into sort of potentially like quarters or something like that, providing this is sort of not, they don't get sort of too drawn out, sort of out focus on the league, because I think they want to do well in the Champions League and the Premier League, but we'll see how well that goes. AC Milan, Liverpool. AC Milan were quite sort of strong a couple of years under Pioli. They looked sort of, they've gone off a little bit. Liverpool, the quality sort of always going to show there, even sort of at the San Siro, is always just going to be a comfortable Liverpool win. AC Milan, I think, will get through the knockouts, but I think there's a sort of definitely some issues behind the scene with that club. And I think there's sort of, and it's still an imbalance within that team, particularly sort of weakness within the midfield. Liverpool, they could barely do no wrong at the moment. Obviously, they had a bit of a blip with the Forest result last sort of weekend, but I fully expect them to get through probably automatically, to be honest with you. Bayern, Zagreb, Bayern absolutely dominant. Don't need to go too much into them. They're going to get through automatically. That squad's just so good. It will just manage itself regardless of the new manager. They'll get through games like this without too much of a worry. Zagreb will have very much worry as they obviously scored a couple here, but Bayern was sort of just going very gun-ho at it. I think Zagreb will potentially struggle. I don't know if there's enough quality within that squad. I think this new setup primarily favours the stronger squads more, whereas sort of it used to be if you had sort of the leagues of sort of 4 teams, you could get the odd team that would get a sort of a couple of lucky results and get through, like it was like an Apoel Nicosia did sort of a few years ago, and sort of teams like that. And I think this structure is very much in favour of the big teams. And small teams are going to potentially struggle, and I think Zagreb will be one of them. I don't see them qualifying. Real Madrid, Stuttgart. I thought Stuttgart gave a good account of themselves. I thought Real Madrid gave up a lot of chances to them. Took them quite a while to click, and I believe it was at the 80th minute because it was 1-1 for quite a while. I thought Courtois was actually man of the match, which is very worrying considering this is sort of the champion. Real Madrid should be considered one of the favourites. They'll get through automatically, but something there hasn't quite fitted. I think sort of a lack of sort of cover sort of with the central defenders. If they pick up injuries to sort of people like Rudiger, they might really sort of struggle and have to put makeshift sort of midfielders into defenders like they did with Camavinga last season. I think they'll come good. There's still teething issues there. Stuttgart, I'm sort of a bit more bullish about. I think obviously they finished second in the Bundesliga last year. I'm excited to see what they could do. I think they'll get into sort of the small sort of knockouts. Whether they get past that, we'll see. Sporting against Lille. I thought these were two sort of evenly-ish sort of matched teams. Lille sort of becoming a bit more consistent in Champions League or sort of European competition. Sporting actually are as well. Home advantage sort of very much counting there. These are two teams that I think will sort of potentially get into those sort of knockout rounds, but might sort of become unstuck depending if they're playing sort of tougher opposition. Bologna Shakhtar, unfortunately, was a bit dull, a bit boring affair. Shakhtar are a team that consistently just sort of that gets into Europe but struggles to get out of groups. I think they'll struggle to get through here. Bologna are a team that sort of got gutted a little bit during the summer with sort of losing Thiago Motta, Calafiori, Joshua Zirkzee. I think they'll struggle. I want them to do well, but I just don't quite see it. I think they might struggle in the domestic leagues as well. Sparta Prague against Salzburg. Salzburg traditionally sort of have been sort of dark horses. A lot of the teams under the Red Bull group always end up doing sort of quite well. I was quite surprised by 3-0 Sparta Prague. I think both of these teams are teams that I don't expect to qualify. I think they'll look to do well in their home games. But we'll see on that one. Celtic, Slovan Bratislava. I was quite surprised, but these were two teams that I always did sort of expect to struggle. Celtic, I'm very surprised sort of with the 5-1 win, how dominant they actually sort of were. I think they probably need this is good for their confidence. So I think they're definitely going to face tougher opposition. They can make Celtic Park a fortress. They can easily enough sort of get through to sort of the next sort of knockout round sort of stage. They won't get in the top sort of 8 qualifying, but I think as long as they're not sort of too leaky and dodgy sort of away from home, at home, I think they can give tougher opposition sort of a good game with the atmosphere and everything. Then we had Club Brugge against last year's finalist Dortmund winning 3-0. Club Brugge, I don't think there's enough sort of quality there to sort of do too much. Dortmund, sort of, it was very much expected even away from home. Sort of a dominant team. I don't think they'll sort of get into sort of automatic qualifying, but I thought were not sort of very good. Man City Inter, bit of a dull 0-0. I think they're both two quality teams. I believe that they will both get through, both sort of champions of their respective leagues. I think they were both a little bit, but I think they'll both have easier games going into sort of the rest of it, and I think they'll be fine. Both of them will be fine. PSG Girona. PSG just about scraped through. So Girona, this is sort of a whole new experience for them. I expect like they're gonna sort of potentially struggle. They're gonna look to their home form. PSG looked just sort of scraping through. It was sort of a poor goalkeeping error from Gazaniga, sort of for Mendes' shot to go straight through him. I expect PSG to be a lot better. Obviously, they're not relying on Kylian Mbappe, but I think they could be coached well and sort of everyone's going to work for the team. I think PSG should be getting in that top 8, sort of qualifying automatically, potentially sort of quarters, sort of slash semis, depending on their route, is how I sort of imagine them going. Feyenoord, Leverkusen. Feyenoord look a bit naff, as I sort of mentioned about the Eredivisie. Sort of, I believe it is a weaker league. I think sort of teams coming out of there sort of struggle. It's very rare that one sort of goes and sort of does anything sort of major. Leverkusen winning 4-0 away from home. Sort of, it's a good sort of dominant display for a team that were so good last year. I would love to see them get through the top 8. I think they might sort of struggle sort of on the tougher away games within sort of the fixtures, but very good, very happy, and is the Bundesliga team that I sort of want to see do well. Red Star Belgrade against Benfica. Benfica won. I would sort of back Benfica to have won that. There's more European pedigree there, even away from home. I expect Benfica to sort of give a good account of themselves, sort of waiting to see what next exciting youngster sort of comes out of Benfica, as there seems to be one every other year, which goes for 70, 80 million sort of plus. I believe it was sort of João Neves to PSG this summer. So we'll see what happens next. But Benfica will be a fun one to watch, particularly for sort of some of the bigger teams sort of doing a bit of scouting for next year. Red Star, I just don't think there's enough quality there. It's not sort of, I think they'll look to try and do well in their home games, but I just don't see it personally. Atalanta Arsenal, 0-0. A little bit disappointed. I sort of was expecting Arsenal to potentially give a better account of themselves. I think they're still adjusting to Champions League football. I think when I look at the qualities of squad, I think Arsenal are one of the best within Europe, which is why I expect them to do sort of very well. Atalanta could have had it, however, there was sort of the penalty and sort of rebound sort of save from David Raya. I'm expecting Arsenal to sort of wake up a bit more in sort of the next sort of few games. Atalanta, admittedly though, they were Europa League champions last year. I still think that they are a fun sort of interesting team. I don't think they'll get knocked out sort of here. I think they'll get into the knockout-y, sort of the mini knockouts as it were, and there'll be a bit of a funny sort of bogey team for anyone to play. Next you have Atletico RB Leipzig. Atletico at home, they're just sort of solid. They know it. They've done it. They'll get through in the top 8 probably. They just know how to get the wins. Leipzig are a potentially sort of fun team to watch and sort of good style of play, but I'm still unsure. Sort of sometimes they can give a good account of themselves, and sometimes teams can rip them open. Like I've seen Man City and Man United rip them open in sort of seasons past before. But I think they'll get through to the sort of mini knockouts, but I don't think they'll get much past that. Brest, Sturm Graz. Unfortunately, this is sort of the slightly less exciting game. Sort of Brest won 2-1. I don't know too much about these teams. I don't have much faith in either of these teams getting through, getting out. They'll do well sort of home-wise. I think Brest took advantage of their home sort of leg. But no, we'll see on that one. Next, sort of the finishing up on the more surprise one, Monaco beating Barcelona 2-1. Monaco, I think, have some good players. I think I was obviously expecting Barcelona to win because they've been the strongest team in La Liga like the start of the season. I think they're sort of adjusting to European Champions League football again against sort of tougher opposition, as I think the opposition in La Liga, I think it's a bit sort of top heavy once you get past the sort of top 5-6 teams. I think the quality is genuinely does sort of drop off a bit. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that. I do expect Barca and Monaco to sort of get through into sort of the mini knockouts. Don't think either of them get through sort of that top 8 sort of side of things. but yeah, sort of like to think I've given a good run through and count there. So thank you for sticking with me in my dulcet tones, as it were. So I was going to give a happy song if I can pronounce this right. So this is it's Biana by Baker Matt. That doesn't sound too familiar to anyone, but I guarantee anyone that has played EAFC or FIFA over the last few years, this song will sound very familiar, very carnival-y, very happy, very upbeat, very good. Very good. I will see you all later. Thank you very much. Goodbye.